Why was she the only one walking? The others crouched low, rifles angled tight to their shoulders, movements calculated, deliberate, as if the storm itself might shoot back at them if they weren't careful. But she walked upright, steady. The sand lashed at her face, stung her eyes, clung to her lashes like salt. And yet she didn't bow. She didn't fold. It wasn't arrogance, it was defiance. Her name was Callen. To the brass, she was a number on a roster. To her team, she was the one you didn't bet against. But inside, behind the calm on her face, a truth she never admitted whispered louder than the storm. She wasn't here for the mission. Not exactly. This was personal. The desert stretched around them, endless, featureless. A pale sky pressed low, smothered in dust. Each gust of wind threw grit like needles against their gear. The team moved in silence, but silence in a place like this wasn't peace. It was a warning. The radio crackled, a low burst of static that seemed too loud against the moaning wind. 3 clicks, compound perimeter, no heat signatures moving yet. The voice belonged to Vickers, their tech specialist. Nervous habit, he always reported early, too eager to prove his worth. Copy, Rourke answered, their leader. His tone was calm, grounded, a rock in a storm. His men and her leaned on that steadiness, whether they admitted it or not. Callen adjusted the strap on her pack, eyes scanning through the haze. The outline of the compound flickered in the distance like a mirage, walls flickering in and out as the dust shifted. It looked dead, but she knew better. Her thumb brushed against the folded paper hidden in her boot. She didn't need to pull it out. She had memorized the words years ago. If they tell you it was quick, don't believe them. These walls don't let people go. Her brother's handwriting, the last thing she had of him. She had never told the others. They thought she was just another sniper on rotation. They didn't know that every step she took toward that compound was another step into a grave she had been digging for years. The storm eased for a moment. Sunlight tore through the haze in a sudden slash of gold. For a heartbeat, the world glowed, every grain of sand glimmering like ash in firelight. And in that fleeting glow, one of the younger soldiers muttered over comms, not realizing his mic was open. Dust swirled around her boots, but her presence cut through the storm like sunlight. A mistake, his voice cracked when he realized. But no one corrected him, no one laughed. They just let it hang in the comms because it was true. She carried something they couldn't name, a gravity, a silence that demanded space. But inside, the words struck her like a bullet. Sunlight, that's what her brother had called her once. His sunlight, his anchor in the dark. Her throat tightened. She blinked hard, forcing the sting of memory away. No one could see her falter. Not here. The compound loomed larger. Concrete walls scarred with cracks, wire coiled lazy across the top. It was supposed to look abandoned. That was the trick. The danger wasn't in what you could see, but in what stayed hidden. She lifted her rifle, peered through the scope. The walls were too clean, too swept. No dust clung to the edges of doorways. No sand piled against the gate. Someone was here, recently. Her finger hovered near the trigger guard, not touching, just feeling its presence. Not abandoned, she murmured. Rourke's eyes flicked toward her. He didn't ask how she knew. He had seen her instincts enough to trust them. Positions, he ordered. The squad spread out, moving like shadows against stone. Boots pressed against walls, rifles ready, breaths held shallow. Callen crouched near the corner of the gate. The storm whistled through metal, an eerie sound like a scream dragged out and twisted. She should have been focused on angles, arcs, kill zones. But her chest burned with a different kind of calculation. If he had been here, her brother, where would they have taken him? How long would he have lasted before the walls consumed him? She shoved the thought down. Not now, not yet. A metallic scrape echoed inside the compound, sharp, jarring. Her scope swung, upper window. A shadow moved, then vanished. Movement, she whispered. The storm thickened again, swallowing the view. The others shifted, tense, waiting. "Your call," Rourke said quietly. Always her call when it came to shadows. She hesitated, felt the weight of grief pressing against the trigger. Every instinct screamed at her, "Not yet, don't show your hand." But her brother's words pushed harder. "These walls don't let people go." "Advance," she said. The gate groaned as they forced it open. Rust screeched like nails on glass. Inside, the air was different, stale, heavy. And wrong. The ground was swept. The walls were clean. No dust, no debris, no sign of abandonment. Someone had cared enough to scrub away the desert's fingerprints. The youngest soldier whispered, almost to himself, "Where is everyone?" His voice trembled. He wanted an answer. They all did. But silence answered back. Callen's eyes flicked across the courtyard. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign of struggle, too perfect. Her breath slowed. Her training whispered, "Perfection is a lie." She lifted her hand, paused, then traced the air like she was brushing dust off glass. A signal, stop. The squad froze. Because in that pause, in that silence, something shifted. Not in the air, in her. The closer she came to this place, the louder the ghosts grew. Memories pressed against her chest. She saw flashes, her brother's grin, the way he had promised he'd be back before winter, the flag folded too neatly in her mother's hands. The storm outside wailed like a morning song. And deep down, Callen knew, this mission wasn't about intel. It wasn't about orders. It was about finding the truth buried in walls that weren't supposed to exist anymore. She hadn't told them, not yet. Because if she said it out loud, if she admitted why she was really here, they might pull her out. And she couldn't leave, not this time. The wind slammed against the gate, rattling it like chains. She tightened her grip on the rifle, stepped forward. And in that breath she felt it. Someone somewhere inside already knew her name. And they were waiting. What was waiting in the silence? The courtyard held its breath, as if even the storm outside dared not step past the gate. Concrete walls rose on every side, pale and clean, too clean. No graffiti, no cracks, just the stillness of a place that pretended to be empty. Callen knelt slowly, her gloves brushing the ground. Smooth, swept. The grit here had been pushed aside. The desert had tried to reclaim this place, and someone had refused to let it. She looked up, windows dark, glass smeared like eyes watching through a veil. A faint smell carried in the air, oil, metal, and something sharper. Antiseptic, too sharp for an abandoned compound. "Clear the perimeter," Rourke ordered softly. His voice was steady, but his eyes flicked to Callen, always gauging her, waiting for her instinct. The squad split, boots padded soft against stone, rifles sweeping arcs of cover. The youngest, Mills, barely 20, kept his shoulders too tight, his breathing loud in the comms. His fear wasn't weakness. It was honesty. Callen stayed near the center, her rifle up, scope gliding over windows and shadows. She forced her heartbeat into rhythm, steady, measured. She had trained for this. She lived for this. And yet, her brother's face kept pressing into the edges of her vision. She blinked hard, focus. Inside her boot, the folded paper pressed against her ankle like a wound. Vickers' voice broke the silence. No signs on thermal, no bodies, no movement. "Doesn't mean it's empty," Callen muttered. "Doesn't mean it's not," Mills said, almost defensively. His voice cracked, betraying the hope underneath. Callen didn't respond. Hope was dangerous. They regrouped near the main door, steel and heavy, hinges rusted but lock reinforced. A keypad glinted faintly under the dust. Rourke pressed a gloved hand against it, eyes narrowing. "Power's live." That detail hung in the air like smoke. An abandoned place doesn't keep its lights on. Callen felt her throat tighten. Whoever had been here was still here, or planned to return. Rourke looked at her. Options. Her finger tapped against her rifle, a subtle rhythm. Break the door and risk noise. circle and search for a quieter entry, or walk away. The third option wasn't real, not for her. Side access, she said. Less obvious. If they're watching, they'll expect the front. Rourke nodded. Hayes, take point. Always her, because she could see paths where others saw walls. They moved along the compound's edge, keeping low against concrete. The storm howled through gaps, carrying voices that weren't there. Sand scraped across their visors like claws. They found the side door half buried in drifting sand. Callen brushed grit from the handle. Faint scratches etched into the metal, as if someone had fought it recently. Her hand hesitated, not fear, recognition. She had seen these scratches before, years ago on another door, another compound, the same hand maybe, the same people. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to breathe slow. Clear, she whispered. Rourke signaled. Vickers moved forward, tools in hand, kneeling by the lock. His hand shook just slightly, but his focus was razor sharp. He worked in silence, wires and picks clicking. Then soft a beep, a green light. The door clicked open. A darkness yawned beyond it. Rourke's fist lifted, signaling silence, then a slow gesture forward. Callen stepped inside first. The air changed immediately, cooler, denser. A faint hum vibrated through the floor. Lights buzzed low, half-dead, casting the hallway in pale shadows. Her boots echoed softly, too loud. She raised her rifle, barrel cutting through the dark. Every sense sharpened. Smell of oil, flicker of light, faint drip of water somewhere deep. This place wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Mills muttered behind her, voice thin. Feels like a tomb. Callen's jaw clenched. He didn't know how close his words were to the truth. They advanced in formation, rifles sweeping. Hallways stretched narrow, lined with doors, some open, revealing empty rooms. Cots stripped bare, cabinets cleaned out, others locked, sealed with heavy bolts. Callen paused at one. Her hand hovered near the lock. For a second she swore she could hear something on the other side, breathing, a whisper. She stepped closer, pressing her ear to cold metal. Silence. Her reflection stared back faintly in the polished steel. Eyes hard, jaw tight, dust streaked across her cheek. She barely recognized herself anymore. Hayes, Rourke called softly. She stepped back, forcing herself away from the door. Not yet, not here. They pressed deeper. The deeper they went, the stronger the antiseptic smell grew. Sterile, wrong. The squad slowed as they entered a larger chamber. Lights flickered overhead, buzzing like trapped flies. Desks overturned. Papers scattered. A projector shattered in the corner. Vickers crouched, lifting one sheet. His voice trembled. English, military formatting. Callen took it, scanned the words. Reports, schedules, prisoner transfers. But the names blurred, smudged, as if water had washed them away. Her throat closed because she had memorized a name, one name. She searched every page for it, her brother's name. Not here, not yet. Her hands shook despite herself. She crushed the paper, stuffed it into her vest. Evidence, proof, or a piece of a lie. Mills' voice broke the silence. Why would they leave this? If they cleared out, why not burn it? Callen looked at him, his young face pale in the flicker, eyes too wide. He wanted answers, needed them. But answers never came clean in places like this. Because they want us to see it, she whispered. The words made the room colder. Rourke scanned the space, jaw clenched. We sweep deeper, Hayes, eyes front. She nodded, moved again. Her boots echoed down the corridor. Her rifle rose with every shadow. Her heartbeat slowed, steady, but inside her chest, grief twisted tighter. She hadn't told them why she was here, not yet. But she could feel it. Every step forward dragged her closer to the truth she had chased for years. The corridor bent. A faint light glowed at the end. Callen froze, lifted her fist. The squad halted. From the chamber ahead came a sound. Not machinery, not wind. Voices. Soft foreign, chanting almost. Her skin prickled. Rourke's voice was low, haze. Her mouth was dry. She wanted to say it was nothing, that they should pull back, that this wasn't their fight. But her brother's words burned again in her skull. These walls don't let people go. She raised her rifle, eyes hard. Forward. The squad shifted behind her, every breath sharp, every boot step deliberate. And as they closed on the chamber, the voices grew louder, not chanting, not prayer. Names. They were speaking names. Callen's blood turned to ice. Because in the blur of foreign syllables, distorted by distance, she swore she heard one she knew. Her brother. What were they saying? The words drifted through the corridor like smoke, curling around the ears, indistinct and heavy. They weren't loud, they weren't hurried, they were steady, intentional. Callen's boots froze mid-step. Her finger pressed against the trigger guard, not inside, not yet, but close enough to feel the weight of choice. The squad stilled behind her, bodies tense, rifles half raised. Vickers whispered, "Language can't pin it, not local." His voice shook, too aware of the strangeness. But Callen wasn't listening to him. Because under the layers of foreign syllables, under the drone of ritual tones, a single word cut through, almost hidden. A name, a familiar one. She swallowed hard, her mouth dry. She had heard wrong, it had to be. But what if she had? Her throat burned. The folded paper in her boot pressed like fire against her skin. Rourke leaned close, his voice low, steady. "Talk to me, Hayes." She couldn't, not yet, not about the letter, not about her brother. If she spoke it out loud, she risked losing the mission, the team's trust, maybe even her place here. She simply whispered, "Voices ahead." Rourke nodded once. "We approach, silent." They moved, each boot pressed carefully to concrete, each breath shallow. The corridor stretched, shadows thick on either side. The humming lights flickered, buzzing like insects ready to die. The voices grew clearer, low, rhythmic. Mills swallowed audibly behind her. He was too young to hide fear, too raw. He tried to control it, but it leaked into his breathing, his rifle rattling faintly against his gear. Callen glanced back just enough to see his pale face. She remembered being him once, younger, unsure, afraid of the silence between orders. She had learned fear never disappeared. You just learned to carry it. They reached the end of the hall. A doorway opened to a chamber beyond. Callen leaned against the wall, scope lifting, peering in through the crack. Shapes moved inside. 3, maybe 4, cloaked, faces shadowed. They stood in a circle, heads bowed, lips moving in unison. On the floor between them lay something, a bundle wrapped in cloth stained dark. Her heart clenched. She couldn't tell what or who was under it. Rourke signaled, 2 fingers, "Wait." He leaned close, his voice barely air. "What do you see?" She exhaled slowly. 4, maybe more, some ritual, something on the ground. "Armed." "Can't see." They waited. The chanting droned on. Time stretched thin, each second dragging sharp against the skin. Finally Rourke gestured. Standard procedure, breach, sweep, clear. But Callen's chest screamed against it. If she gave the order, if they stormed in, and if that name she thought she heard was real. What if they killed him before she saw his face? Her fingers twitched against the rifle. A war raged in her chest. Duty against grief. Mission against memory. Mills leaned close, whispering too loud. "Why aren't we moving?" Rourke's hand shot up, silence. But it was too late. The voices inside stopped. A silence heavier than stone fell. Callen's pulse hammered. The cloaked figures turned, heads angling toward the doorway, as if they had always known the soldiers were there. Then darkness. The chamber lights cut at once. A hum, a click, silence. Vickers cursed under his breath. Power cut. "Comms still live," Rourke whispered. "Night optics now." Callen flipped her scope. Green light bathed the dark, shapes glowing faint. The cloaked figures had scattered, melting into corners, walls, shadows. The bundle on the ground remained, still, unmoving. Her chest locked tight. "Move," Rourke ordered. They stormed in. Boots pounded concrete, rifles rose, scanning arcs, shadows danced, figures vanished. Mills shouted, "Contact left," fire sparked. Concrete chipped, the air filled with the thunder of suppressed rounds. Callen moved fast, instincts carving paths. Her rifle found shapes in corners, her shots precise, deliberate. 2 shadows fell, others fled. But her eyes weren't on them. They were on the bundle. She crossed the floor, heart slamming against ribs. The cloth was rough, stained. She knelt, hands trembling despite herself. She pulled it back. Not him. A mannequin. Plastic shattered in places, wrapped to look human, to bait them. Her breath caught, fury and grief colliding. They had been lured. A voice hissed in the comms, not theirs, a stranger's, crackling through their channel, impossible. "You shouldn't have come." Every soldier froze, eyes darted, searching. The voice was low, accented, deliberate. Hayes. Her blood ran cold. Her name. Not rank, not sniper, not soldier, her name. The others looked at her, confused, demanding answers with their eyes. She couldn't give them, not now. The voice chuckled dark. "We kept one, you want him back." Her chest collapsed inward, breath caught like knives. They knew, they had always known. Her brother. Her knees pressed hard against the concrete, fists clenching. For a moment the room spun. She wanted to rip the comms out, scream into the darkness, demand proof. But she stayed still, silent. Rourke's eyes locked onto hers, hard, demanding, "What is this?" She opened her mouth. And couldn't. Not yet. The storm outside roared louder, wind slamming against the compound walls, dust seeping through cracks like smoke. The voice returned, calm, mocking. "Follow the trail, alone, or the boy dies." The line cut. Static swallowed the silence. Callen's hands shook against her rifle. She forced them still, but the tremor lingered in her chest. The squad stared at her, questions burning. Rourke's jaw tightened. He saw it in her eyes, knew this wasn't random. "Hayes," his voice sharp, controlled, "what aren't you telling me?" She swallowed. The paper in her boot felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She whispered, voice raw, "He's alive." The words cracked open the silence like a shot. Mills blinked, confused. "Who?" Her lips trembled. For the first time she said it out loud. "My brother." The room felt smaller, walls closing in. The squad's silence wasn't judgment, it was shock. And Rourke's stare cut deepest. Not anger, not yet, just betrayal. Because missions weren't personal, they couldn't be, not in places like this. But for Callen Hayes, they always had been. And now the ghosts had spoken back. The shots still echoed in her ears, not the one she had fired hours ago, but the one she hadn't. The one she had hesitated on. It replayed every time she blinked. Every time she tried to close her eyes, there it was, an enemy target in her sights, a clean shot, the kind her instructors had drilled into her bones. But her finger had frozen. Just a fraction of a second, just enough. Why? She told herself it was the sandstorm. Visibility had been low, but no storm could explain the truth. She had seen his face. Not a hardened soldier, not a faceless enemy. A boy. 17, maybe 18. Not much older than she had been when she first wore the uniform. He had looked frightened, clumsy in the rifle he carried, his body language screaming hesitation. He had reminded her of her brother. And she had waited, long enough for him to drop behind cover and disappear into the maze of clay buildings. Long enough for her team to notice her silence on comms. Now, as she sat against the wall of a crumbling house, night pressing in around them, she could feel Sergeant Cole's eyes on her. He hadn't said anything, not yet, but he knew. He always knew. The squad had split into two fire teams. Half were resting, the others keeping watch. The storm had died with the sun, leaving the air heavy with dust, a strange silence replacing the howl of wind. The silence was deceptive. It made every distant sound sharper. A scrape of metal, a footstep, the low groan of a shifting beam. Every sound could mean nothing or everything. "Eyes open," Cole whispered to the team, his voice steady but edged with fatigue. He glanced at her briefly, then moved on, checking positions. She tried not to meet his gaze, but the silence gave her too much room to think. She thought of her brother again, the boy with the guitar, the one who had promised to come home. She had been 12 when they buried him, and she had sworn, as the flag was folded and placed in her mother's hands, that she would never freeze, that she would never let hesitation cost lives. And yet, "Can't sleep either." The voice came from her left. Corporal Diaz, sitting cross-legged with his rifle resting across his lap. His face was lit faintly by the glow of his watch screen, eyes tired but warm. She shook her head, too quiet. He gave a dry chuckle. "That's when it's worst. Quiet means they're thinking, moving, waiting. I'd almost prefer the shooting." She didn't answer. Diaz didn't push. Instead, he leaned his head back against the wall, staring up at the patch of sky visible through the hole in the roof. "You know," he said softly, "before this deployment my kid asked me what I do out here. She's 7. She thought I was some kind of superhero. I told her I just keep people safe. That's it. That's the whole job." She bought it. There was a weight in his tone, a crack he tried to cover with humor, but she heard it. She envied it too, the thought of someone waiting for him, someone who believed in his purpose. "Why'd you tell me that?" she asked quietly. Diaz shrugged. "Because sometimes I forget, and saying it out loud helps me remember." The words sat between them, heavy and honest. She looked away, gripping her rifle tighter because she couldn't say the truth back. She wasn't sure if she even remembered anymore. Movement outside cut the moment short. A shadow flickered against the broken wall. Cole's hand went up instantly, signaling silence. The squad froze. Every sound, the creak of a strap, the faint click of a safety, stilled. The night pressed closer. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, too light for boots. Then a voice, muffled, a child. Her breath caught. Another sound followed, the distinct metallic rattle of a magazine being loaded. The squad tensed. Cole mouthed the order, "Hold." They waited, listening as the footsteps passed, fading back into the narrow alleys outside. When Cole finally gave the all-clear, she exhaled a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But the unease didn't leave. Because she knew, it wasn't the same boy, but it could have been. Later, when the team rotated for rest, she found herself unable to close her eyes. Instead, she stared at the cracked ceiling, memories blurring with the present. Her brother's last letter replayed in her mind. She had it folded in her chest pocket, creased and worn. He had written, "Don't carry me into the fight. Carry yourself. Promise me you'll stay you." She had broken that promise. Somewhere between the deployments, the firefights, the endless briefings where her voice never quite carried enough weight, she had lost pieces of herself. The hesitation tonight had been proof. There was still something left. But was it weakness? Or was it the only human part of her she hadn't buried? She didn't know. At dawn, Cole pulled her aside, away from the others, near the edge of the ruined courtyard. "You froze yesterday," he said flatly. Not an accusation, a fact. She swallowed hard. "I saw his face." Cole studied her. His own face was lined, weathered from years in the desert. We all see faces. She looked down. "He wasn't ready, he was just a kid." "That kid could have killed you, or any one of us." His tone was sharp now, but under it was something else. Worry, maybe even care. She wanted to argue, wanted to explain the knot in her chest, the image burned behind her eyes, but the words stuck. Cole sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You've got instincts, good ones, But out here, hesitation gets people killed, including you. Don't let ghosts make your choices. Ghosts, the word cut deeper than he knew. Before she could answer, a shout came from the perimeter. Movement. The squad snapped into position, rifles raised, eyes scanning the alleyways. Dust swirled as a truck appeared at the far end of the street, headlights off, rolling slow. The air grew electric. Cole barked orders, voices overlapping as soldiers took cover. Her heart pounded, not from fear, at least not the kind that made you freeze, but from the sharp edge of choice. If she fired first, she might be right, she might be wrong, and the line between the two could mean lives. The truck rolled closer, stopped. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the door creaked open. A boy stepped out. Not the same one, but close enough. Same awkward stance, same frightened eyes, and he was carrying something heavy in his hands. Her rifle locked on him, finger ready, breath caught. And again she hesitated, because she recognized the weight in his hands. Not a rifle, a box, wooden, battered, cradled against his chest like it was fragile. The squad shouted, ordering him to drop it. He froze, trembling. She saw it, truly saw it, before anyone else did. The box wasn't a weapon, it was food, dates, bread, water bottles. Supplies. The boy set it down, raising his hands. His chest rose and fell fast, panic written across every movement. Cole's voice boomed, sharp and commanding. Stand down, hold fire. The squad eased, rifles lowering, but the air didn't relax. Because the question now hung heavy. Why was a boy delivering supplies at dawn? And more pressing, who had sent him? That night, long after the boy had vanished back into the alleys, leaving the supplies behind, she sat alone with her thoughts. The squad ate in silence, grateful but wary. Cole paced, suspicious. Diaz muttered about traps. No one fully trusted the gift. But she kept replaying the moment in her head. The boy's eyes, the way his hands shook, the quiet desperation. It wasn't just food. It was a message, a warning, maybe even a plea. And it terrified her, because she realized something she hadn't admitted until now. The enemy wasn't just out there in the shadows. It was inside her, in the hesitation, in the memory of faces she couldn't forget. And if she didn't find a way to reconcile that, to carry both the soldier and the sister, then this mission, this squad, would break her before the fight even began. The storm had passed, but the real battle was only just starting. And deep down she knew she couldn't hide from it much longer. Why did the boy leave food instead of taking a shot? Why risk his life at dawn, walking into the line of rifles pointed at his chest? The question gnawed at her all morning. It was worse than the sand grinding against her skin, worse than the hunger pressing at her stomach, because there were no clear answers. And in this place, uncertainty was more dangerous than bullets. Cole paced like a caged wolf, never sitting, never resting. Every glance he threw toward the supplies was heavy with suspicion. It doesn't add up, he muttered to himself. No one gives without asking for something back. Not here. Diaz tried to break the tension. Maybe they're just hungry like us. Maybe they figured we're less trouble-fed than starving. He popped a date into his mouth anyway, chewing with a grin he didn't really feel. But the others avoided the food. Some muttered about poison, others about hidden trackers. Superstition filled the silence where trust should have been. She sat apart, cradling her rifle, eyes fixed on the dusty horizon. The desert stretched out endlessly, a canvas of emptiness broken only by jagged ruins. Yet her thoughts weren't on the land. They were on the boy, on his shaking hands, on the fear in his eyes that mirrored her own. Her brother's face surfaced again. The same boyish awkwardness, the same haunted expression. It was as if the desert had reached into her chest and pulled the memory straight into the present. She pressed a hand against her uniform, feeling the folded letter still tucked away. Worn, fragile, a relic she should have left at home but couldn't. She imagined her brother's voice, the way he would have laughed at the absurdity of her situation. You join to protect, not to unravel. Cole's voice cut through her thoughts. We move at nightfall. The squad shifted uneasily. Moving meant exposure. It meant risk. But it also meant momentum. Sitting still too long in these ruins would draw attention, and attention was death. She finally spoke, her voice low but steady. What if the food wasn't a trick? What if it was a warning? Cole turned sharply. His stare pinned her, hard and unyielding. And what do you think it warned us of? She hesitated, then said the thing gnawing at her chest, that we're not alone out here. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. The squad exchanged looks, some skeptical, some uneasy. Diaz raised an eyebrow, tilting his head as if to say, you might not be wrong. Cole didn't dismiss her, that was worse. He just stared, jaw tight, then finally said, we move at nightfall. His tone left no room for argument. But in the pause before he walked away, she caught it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. When night fell, the squad moved like shadows. Boots pressed into dust, weapons angled low but ready. The moon was a thin sliver, offering little light. Their night vision goggles turned the ruins into a green-lit dreamscape, every shadow a possible ambush. She took rear guard, scanning the alleys they left behind. Every flicker of movement set her nerves on edge, but what unnerved her more was the absence of sound. No dogs barking, no voices in the distance, just silence. Too much silence. Diaz whispered through comms, his humor cracking under the weight of tension. Feels like walking through a graveyard. Cole's reply was flat, that's because it is. They pressed on, navigating the labyrinth of alleys. Every turn felt like it could collapse in on them. Every corner promised either safety or death. She spotted the first sign, a smear of fresh paint on a wall almost glowing under night vision. A symbol, not random graffiti but deliberate, markers. Her pulse quickened, she recognized them. She had seen the same symbols years ago in her first deployment. The insurgents used them to mark safe routes, supply caches, ambush points. She remembered tracing them with her fingertips once, feeling the grooves in the paint as her translator explained their meaning. Now the same symbols lined the walls they passed. Her breath hitched, she switched channels, her voice low. Cole, we're walking into a corridor. He didn't answer right away. Then, I see it. The squad slowed. Eyes darted, rifles tightened. But there was no turning back. The alleys funneled them forward, narrowing, pressing. And then the first sound cracked the silence. A voice, young, calling in the dark. Not words they could understand, but a tone clear as daylight, warning. The squad froze. The sound was followed by another, metal scraping, a shutter slamming open. Then the world erupted. Bullets tore through walls, dust exploding into the air. Shadows moved above them across rooftops, figures silhouetted against the night sky. Cole shouted, orders crisp but urgent. The squad scattered into cover, returning fire. She pressed against a wall, rifle raised, scanning the rooftops. The green glow of night vision turned chaos into eerie silence, as if she were watching a nightmare unfold through glass. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. She found her first target, a rooftop sniper leaning out of a shattered window. One breath, one squeeze. The figure crumpled. The squad was pinned, but they weren't breaking. Diaz shouted curses between bursts of gunfire. Another soldier screamed a warning before being dragged to cover, wounded but alive. She fired again, the recoil sharp against her shoulder. But then her scope landed on another figure. Smaller, thinner, the silhouette of a boy. The same awkward stance, the same trembling hands gripping a rifle too big for his frame. Her breath froze. The desert seemed to still, gunfire muffled, heartbeats louder. Her finger hovered, every instinct screamed at her to fire, every memory begged her to wait. And in that fragile, suspended moment, she thought of her brother's letter. Don't carry me into the fight. Carry yourself. The boy's rifle wavered, not aimed at her, not steady. His entire body shook like the weapon weighed more than he did. She lowered her scope just a fraction, just enough. And in that sliver of hesitation, someone else fired. The boy dropped, vanishing into the shadows. Her chest caved inward, air knocked out though no bullet had touched her. Cole's voice barked through comms, snapping her back. Move, flank left. She pushed off the wall, forcing her legs into motion. The firefight raged on, chaos swallowing hesitation, but her mind was no longer in the alley. It was with the boy, with her brother, with the truth she didn't want to face. That hesitation wasn't weakness, it was humanity. And out here, humanity could kill you just as fast as a bullet. When the squad finally broke contact, retreating deeper into the ruins, they collapsed in the shell of another abandoned house. Dust clung to their sweat, their breaths ragged. One was wounded, bandaged quickly. No one spoke for a long while. Cole finally broke the silence. They knew we were coming. They were ready for us. Dia spat into the dirt. So much for friendly food deliveries. The squad chuckled bitterly, but she didn't. Her hands shook, hidden against her rifle. She felt Cole's eyes on her again, heavy, measuring. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Because he didn't need to. She already knew the question hanging in the air. Would she keep freezing when the moment came? And if she did, how many would it cost? What was worse, the firefight they barely survived or the silence that followed it? She couldn't decide. Both pressed against her chest like weight she couldn't breathe through. The squad sat scattered inside the ruined house, lit only by the faint glow of chem lights. Shadows stretched across cracked walls, the smell of blood and gun oil thick in the air. No one wanted to speak first. The kind of silence that came after chaos wasn't peace. It was suspicion. It was blame. Sergeant Cole finally broke it. His voice was steady, controlled, but his eyes betrayed the storm underneath. We can't stay here. They'll press us again. We move before dawn. Diaz, sitting against the wall with a bandage wrapped around his arm, gave a humorless laugh. Sure, move where? Every street looks the same. Every corner feels like a setup. Cole ignored him. Instead, he looked at her. Not a glare this time, just a heavy, measured stare. What did you see? He asked. The question made her pulse quicken. Not did you fire, not why did you freeze again. Just, what did you see? She swallowed, throat dry. Kids, boys with rifles too heavy for their shoulders. They weren't soldiers, not really. The silence after her words was colder than gunfire. Some of the squad shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided her gaze. Finally, Diaz muttered, "Didn't stop them from trying to kill us." Her jaw clenched. He wasn't wrong, and yet. Cole cut in. Doesn't matter how old they look. If they carry, they fight. If they fight, they fall. His words were clipped hard, but then softer, almost reluctant, he added, "That doesn't mean you have to like it." Her breath caught, because for the first time she saw something crack in him too. He wasn't made of stone. None of them were. But cracks in stone could collapse walls. They moved before dawn. The desert was still, a gray veil stretching across the horizon. Their boots crunched softly against the dirt, every sound amplified in the fragile quiet. They followed narrow alleys, weaving between broken walls and burned-out vehicles, the city around them both alive and dead. Her position was rear guard again. She kept her rifle trained on the spaces they left behind, every shadow a possible echo of the firefight. Her thoughts drifted as they walked, the rhythm of movement pulling her inward, back to the beginning, back to why she was here. She remembered the day she enlisted. The look on her mother's face, anger layered over grief, as if losing one child to war hadn't been enough. Her mother had begged her not to go, had shouted that she was throwing her life away chasing ghosts. But she couldn't explain then. Couldn't explain that every night she saw her brother's face in her dreams, heard his laughter cut short by the silence of a folded flag. Couldn't explain the need to finish what he hadn't, to carry the fight he'd carried, to prove his death wasn't meaningless. It wasn't duty that drove her, it was guilt. And guilt didn't fade. Contact. The shout snapped her back. The squad dropped low, rifles up. Through the narrow street ahead, figures moved. Not rushing, not firing, just watching. Shadows of men standing in doorways, leaning from rooftops, silhouetted in the pale dawn light. Too many. Cole raised a fist, signaling hold. The squad froze, hearts pounding. The figures didn't move closer, didn't retreat, just stared. The air grew thick, charged with a silence heavier than any battle. Then slowly one of the men raised a hand, not in surrender, not in threat, just a simple lift of his palm showing it was empty. Cole's jaw tightened. He lowered his rifle an inch. "Wait," she whispered through comms. Because she recognized something. The same symbol painted on the wall 2 nights ago was etched on the man's sleeve. A marker. Not enemy, not ally, something in between. She stepped forward, just enough for her boots to scrape against the dirt. All eyes turned toward her. The man's gaze met hers. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw recognition, not of her face but of her hesitation, of her silence in the fight. He spoke, words she couldn't understand, the cadence slow, deliberate. Cole gestured sharply. "We don't engage, we move." But the man stepped forward, blocking their path. He pointed down another alley, urgent, insistent. Daya's cursed under his breath. "It's a trap, has to be." Her chest tightened, because she didn't know if it was a trap, but she knew something else. If it were, they'd already be dead. The numbers weren't in their favor. "Let me," she said quietly. Cole's head snapped toward her. "No." She steadied her voice. "He's not stopping all of us, he's stopping me." The words surprised her as much as him, but they felt true. Cole's jaw clenched, muscles tight. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then finally, 30 seconds, that's all. Her legs felt heavy as she stepped forward, rifle lowered but not slung. The man didn't move, didn't flinch. His eyes, dark and tired, locked with hers. He pointed again down the alley, his voice lowered, urgent. She caught a single word through the haze of language, a word she recognized. "Danger." Her stomach dropped. The man gestured again, harder this time. Then, without another glance, he slipped back into the shadows, vanishing. She stood frozen. Dust swirled around her boots. Cole's voice snapped through comms. "Well." She turned slowly. He wasn't warning us to stay out. He was warning us what's coming in. The silence that followed was suffocating. Because if she was right, it meant the firefight 2 nights ago wasn't the real fight. It meant something bigger was closing in. That night, as they fortified what little cover they had in another ruin, the squad's tension bled into exhaustion. Daya's muttered jokes without laughter. Another soldier scribbled in a pocket notebook, hands trembling. Cole paced, more restless than usual. She sat alone, watching the horizon fade into black. Her brother's letter burned in her pocket. "Don't carry me into the fight. Carry yourself." But who was she now? The soldier who hesitated, the sister chasing ghosts, the woman reading warnings in strangers' eyes. She didn't know. All she knew was this: the storm wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. And when it hit, hesitation wouldn't be an option. Why was it so quiet after so much chaos? The desert wind carried only a hollow sigh, as though the earth itself had exhaled in exhaustion. She stood at the edge of the outpost, rifle hanging slack against her vest, dust streaking her face. The silence wasn't peace, it was absence, and absence had its own weight. The men around her moved in fragments, bandaged arms, crutches, the metallic clink of someone reloading a half-empty magazine, even though no more rounds were coming. A medic whispered curses under his breath, pressing gauze against a wound he couldn't close. And she, standing still in the pale light, felt as though her body had forgotten what to do without orders. Her hand brushed her side, where bruises deepened beneath the fabric. Her legs trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion, yet her spine refused to bend. Someone had to remain upright. Someone had to hold the line of silence when words would collapse it. Then came the question that cut sharper than shrapnel. "Ma'am, what now?" It was the youngest soldier, the one she'd promised herself she wouldn't let die here. His voice cracked, fragile in the emptiness, eyes wide like a child's asking his mother why the world had turned cruel. He wanted direction, but what he really asked was, "Are we still alive? Do we still matter?" She swallowed, the words caught like sandpaper in her throat. For years she had carried orders, but giving them, that was different. That was responsibility naked, with no room for excuses. She opened her mouth, but before the sound came, memory intruded. Her father's hand on her shoulder years ago when she was still too small to hold his boots steady. "Strength isn't loud," he'd told her. "Strength holds silence until the storm passes." She hadn't understood then. She understood now. Her lips parted, the words were few, measured. "We hold, we stay, we don't break." The boy nodded, but his eyes still trembled. And so she stepped closer, let her hand graze his shoulder, not as command but as anchor. The kind of touch that says, "I won't let you fall alone." Night returned like a slow tide. One by one, the injured dozed in uneasy sleep, their breaths shallow, their dreams scattered. She didn't sleep. Her gaze fixed on the horizon, the dark bruise of mountains in the distance. The enemy was still out there, maybe regrouping, maybe watching. Or maybe they were gone, leaving behind ghosts to do the work. Her thoughts drifted uninvited, to the letter folded deep in her pack, the one she had written but never sent. It was addressed to no one, or maybe to the version of herself that might survive all this. In it, she had admitted the things she never said aloud, that she was tired of carrying weight no one could see, that every victory felt like sand slipping between her fingers, that sometimes she dreamed of quiet, real quiet, not the kind haunted by loss. But she hadn't thrown it away. She kept it, a secret confession, proof that beneath the armor there was still a heart beating, uncertain, fragile but still stubborn enough to beat. Hours passed. Stars sharpened above, cold and indifferent. She counted them not for guidance but for proof the sky hadn't changed, even if everything else had. Then footsteps, slow, approaching. She didn't move her rifle, she already knew. It was the lieutenant, his shadow long across the dust. He sat beside her, bones heavy, his breath thick with smoke and regret. "You should rest," he murmured. She shook her head. "They need someone awake. They need you alive." The silence stretched between them, both knowing the truth hiding in his tone. He wasn't worried about her strength. He was worried about her breaking, on the inside, where no one could patch the wound. "I don't know if I'm enough for them," she whispered finally. His gaze turned toward the horizon where faint light began to bleed. "None of us are. That's why we stand together. Alone we fall. Together we maybe hold." His voice cracked on the last word. She studied him. The lines of fatigue, the weight of years. He wasn't invincible. None of them were. That realization didn't weaken her. It grounded her. The first streaks of dawn colored the sky. Not golden but pale, fragile. The kind of light that doesn't promise safety, only survival. She exhaled slowly. The sound was almost prayer. By morning, the survivors stirred. They looked at her first, not because she had ordered it, but because somehow in their eyes she had become the still point in the storm. The dust swirled again, but it parted around her. She adjusted the strap of her rifle. Her voice carried steady now. "We move at first light, not back, not forward, just enough." The boy from the night before looked at her differently, not with desperation but with something fragile, trust. And that was heavier than any weapon she had ever carried. The day stretched ahead like a wound waiting to heal. Whether it would or not, she didn't know. But her boots pressed into the earth, her steps cut through the dust, and for that moment, that fragile, fleeting moment. She believed she could still walk through the storm without letting it take her. What was left to say when the noise was finally gone? The horizon burned with the soft copper of an ending sun, and for the first time in days, the air was empty of gunpowder, shouting, and fear. She stood where the ground dipped into silence, boots sunk slightly into the dust, her shadow stretching longer than she felt she had a right to. Her rifle was slung behind her shoulder now, not gripped in fists. The weight of it felt almost foreign, like a relic from another life. Around her, the survivors moved in quiet patterns, some patching torn gear, others simply staring into nothing, as though the mind had retreated to places safer than here. A boy knelt not far from her, carving something into the dirt with a dull knife. At first she thought it was just restless motion, but then she saw it take shape, a name, then another, then another. Each letter etched with care, small memorials in soil that would never hold stone. He didn't notice her watching. That was good. Some grief belonged to silence. She closed her eyes, and for a moment her ears filled with a phantom sound. Laughter. From years before. The rare kind of laughter that comes when people believe they'll live long enough to waste time. She opened her eyes and it was gone, replaced only by the hush of wind and the steady tremor of her own heartbeat. The lieutenant approached slowly, his gait uneven from the wound he refused to let slow him. He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he lowered himself onto a broken crate, elbows on knees, face bent toward the earth. "They'll write this up like a victory," he muttered, voice low. "Numbers cleaned, reports typed. They'll never say what it took." She said nothing, because he was right, because truth was too heavy for paper. After a long silence, he lifted his head. "You carried them, you know, whether you believe it or not." She shook her head. "I just stood there." "Exactly," he said. "When everything wanted to collapse, you stood. That's more than most." Her throat ached. She wanted to argue, to deny, to confess the fear that had chewed at her bones in every breath. But she didn't. Some truths, too, belonged to silence. As dusk bled into night, the squad gathered in a loose circle. No fire, too risky. Just bodies close enough to remind themselves they weren't alone. One by one, stories surfaced. Short, uneven, broken at the edges. A man spoke of the daughter he hadn't seen in 3 years. Another of the farm he left behind, the rows of corn that might be dead by now. The medic, his voice raw, spoke not of loss but of a patient who had once survived against all odds, and how that memory kept him from breaking today. When it came to her, no one asked her to speak, but all eyes turned anyway, expectant, waiting. She hesitated. Words always felt too small, but then in the hush she let one slip. "My father used to say strength doesn't shout," she whispered. "It just endures. I didn't understand then, I do now." The circle was silent, not empty, alive, waited, listening. And in that silence she felt something release, like a fist unclenching. Later, when the stars spread sharp and cold above, she walked away from the circle. Her boots pressed into the sand, her breath visible in the cooling air. At the edge of the camp she stopped. She reached into her pack and pulled out the folded letter, the one she had never sent. She held it for a long time, the paper soft with wear, the words inside a confession only she would ever know. Then slowly she tore it, piece by piece. The scraps caught in the wind, lifted, scattered, gone. She didn't need it anymore. The weight wasn't lighter, but it was hers to carry. When she returned, the boy who had carved names in the dirt was asleep, his knife resting beside him. The lieutenant's head had tipped forward, exhaustion finally winning. The medic sat awake, eyes distant, but when she caught his gaze, he gave a small nod as if to say, "We're still here. That's enough." She lay down finally, the earth hard beneath her, the sky endless above. Her eyes refused to close, but her body softened. She let the rhythm of others' breathing anchor her. At the edge of her mind, a thought whispered, not loud, not triumphant, just steady. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And when dawn came again, the dust swirled as always, but it parted around her boots. She rose, steady, silent, and walked forward.